Hey everyone, I wanted to give a quick progress update on stuff we've been doing on the zero cycle. The video I'm showing here is from a video I uploaded earlier today. It's a co-op trios FSG run I did with BGR and Hama, and we used a zero cycle to finish off the dragon. So in Minecraft speedrunning, there's a lot of different categories, and so the zero cycle can be used for multiple categories in different ways. And so I wanted to go over 3 different ways to zero cycle. So I'm going to talk about the co-op setup, which the setup is essentially done. It's really simple. It takes a little bit of practice, but it's very easy. There's an SSG zero cycle setup, which is only possible on the right seed and it's very difficult to do. And then there's an RSG zero cycle setup, which I still need a lot of help on. It's definitely not done or consistent yet, but it will get there someday. So with that, let's get into the co-op zero cycle. So the co-op zero cycle, it's actually pretty simple. I have Hama here to help me out. And basically one player just needs a bow and a couple arrows and a pick, and then the other player just needs some blocks, the beds to do the cycle, and ideally 2 obsidian to make the cycle easier. So my job here as the first player is to simply just shoot a single crystal and then dig down 10 blocks and hide. That's pretty much it. I just have to make sure after I shoot this crystal that the dragon cannot see me to fireball me, and I just have to stand there. Basically, this forces a dragon to strafe on my position, the block that I'm standing on, and so as long as I'm down here, the dragon will only stop strafing me if it either gets within 10 blocks of my feet or it fireballs me. So as long as I'm down here, the dragon is just going to continuously circle down towards me. And so the second player, Hama, up here, all he has to do is execute the zero cycle. So he's made a little 2 obsidian, kind of just like the center bedrock perch, but he's made a little cycle platform for himself, and he just has to do the cycle. So this can be done in 5 beds if you're pretty good with timing. I think Hama does it in 6 here. It does take a few hours of practice. It is a little bit awkward and different compared to a 1 cycle, but the dragon does pattern very well, and yeah, it's actually incredibly easy. I think the days of co-ops waiting for 1 cycles are kind of over. The zero cycle in co-op sitting is very, very easy once you've practiced it. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Very simple. I think the setup's done. You can do this anywhere on the end island you want, as long as you kind of make a little barrier so the dragon doesn't fireball you. So yeah, now we can go on to kind of the set seed idea, and I'll talk more about, Hama's perspective and doing this from a single player point of view, how to trigger the beds to get the most damage. So I wanted to show my fastest end fight example using this kind of instant zero cycle idea that Matthew Bolan was kind of the first to talk about, and it's kind of a set seed or SRG idea, because this can only work on maybe 1 or 2% of ends. But if you're practiced and you execute this well, you can actually do this with 100% accuracy and always get a sub 1 minute dragon fight. And I'll talk about the reasons why only a couple percent of ends can actually do this. But it can be done with 100% accuracy, which is really cool. So yeah, I think I do this one in 6 beds, and I'll talk about kind of the timing and the pattern that the dragon does here and why this only works on a few ends. And yeah, the death animation is really a big bummer here. The dragon does have to slowly spiral down until it reaches the same height that you normally 1 cycle at. So I finished the dragon off here at 31 seconds, and it takes till I think 54 to actually get it. So yeah, we'll talk about the mechanics of this now. Okay, so let's do a little crash course in dragon mechanics. First off, when you spawn in the end, or you save and quit in the end, the dragon is basically reloaded at the 0, maximum height position, and there's a couple things that dictates its initial type and where it flies to. So first of all, I'm using Matthew Bolan's mod. I will have a link to download this in the description below. I highly suggest, if you're trying out zero cycles, that you download this so you get a better idea of how the dragon behaves. So first of all, the first thing that we can find out about our dragon is if it's a close dragon or a far dragon. These boxes, these gray boxes, are all the nodes around the end island that dictate the dragon's behavior. It basically highlights a yellow node when it needs to go to that position, and the orange block above this yellow node is its actual target block that it needs to get within 10 blocks of to consider that node satisfied, and then it goes to its next node in its path. So when we first spawn in the dragon, The dragon is either going to be a close dragon or a far dragon. And that's determined by the height of this east pillar node and the west pillar node. Whichever one is taller, the dragon will favor that side. So you see how this west pillar node on the far end of the end island is actually taller. This is at Y117. We're facing west. If we go to the east, this node is actually Y111. And so the further node is taller, and so the dragon tends to go towards that node. So if I save and quit and boot up the same world, it's still going to be a far dragon because the node on the opposite pillar is still taller, and so it goes towards that node. Now, it has two different directions it can choose. So we know it's a far dragon. It's going to go that way every time. 7 out of 8 times, it's going to be a diagonal far dragon and choose this node, and 1 out of 8 times, it's going to be a front to back far dragon, and it's going to choose this node to travel to. The first node dictates where it circles when it spawns from max height and has to go all the way down to this target block. So if again I save and quit and reset this dragon, it's going to respawn one. It's again going to be a far dragon, but we'll see this time if we get, oh, we got the 1 out of 8s this time. So 1 out of 8 times it will choose this node and go front to back, and 7 out of 8 times it'll be diagonal and go to that side. So again, I'll just do this one more time for example, but it'll most likely choose the diagonal one. So yeah, so this time it chose this one as well. So what does a front dragon look like? A front dragon is going to be the same thing. When we spawn in on the end platform over here, the front dragon is either going to go 7/8 out of the time to this diagonal node right here, or 1 out of 8 times it's going to go to this one. So I'll boot up a seed where I know it's going to be a close one. And here we got the 7 out of 8 time, it's going to go to this node. So there's only 4 different directions a dragon can ever decide to go immediately off of spawn. And most of the time it's going to be back left or front right. And it's just, again, dependent on this height. So in this case, this node on this pillar is taller. We can clearly see this one's taller than the one further away from there. So this is going to be a front dragon every time, and either go front right or straight here. So going back to the instant zero cycle idea, essentially the idea is we just beat the dragon to this first node and kill it before it is even allowed to get here. And the bed explosions will deal knockback vertically, so the dragon will maintain its same height as we're doing the cycle. The tricky part about this is this node here is a certain amount of blocks above the end stone below it. In this case, it's 77. The orange target block that you see that spawns above these nodes can spawn anywhere from 0 to 20 blocks above the node randomly. And all the dragon needs to do is get within 10 blocks of that orange target block. So, worst case scenario, if we get a front dragon and its first node is this one, at Y77, it could potentially spawn a target block all the way up here at Y97, which means in order to satisfy that it's reached that target block, all it has to do is get to Y107. And so all of a sudden we need the dragon to not reach below Y107 to get this to work 100% of the time. So what that means is that we need a correct pillar height in the front right so that it's tall enough where we can pearl up here and then build up to around Y100, Y105 to trigger our bed so the dragon doesn't get below that. If this tower is too short, we can't build up here fast enough to beat the dragon, and if this tower is too high, this end crystal will be within range of our beds, and the bed explosions will destroy the crystal, which makes the dragon strafe us, which means the whole zero cycle is ruined. So it's a very particular pillar height that we need for this to work. So now hopefully you can understand why this is actually so rare to be able to do this instant cycle, because we need a lot of things to go right on this end island. Number one, when we spawn on our platform, we can't be buried in a cage of endstone. If we have to mine up through endstone, we're already too late to beat the dragon there. We can't have any layers of endstone above us. Number two, we have to be able to pearl twice to get here. 1 to pearl onto this endstone, 2 to pearl up to the corner of this obsidian tower. Number 3, we need a close dragon spawn. If it's a far dragon spawn, it's either going to spawn back there or back there on those nodes, and we can't get there in time. Fourth thing, we need the dragon to hit its 7 out of 8 chance to go to this node. If it hits the 1 out of 8 chance to go to this node, there's no way we can get into this position in time to zero cycle it. There's not enough blocks up here. So we have to hit that 7/8 chance. And lastly, we need the correct pillar height. It has to be a medium pillar height, not too low or not too tall. So that's why I say the SSG kind of instant zero cycle only works on maybe 1 or 2% of all end islands. It just, everything has to go perfectly right. So because that setup is so rare to get working, that's why I consider it more of a set seed or a scouted seed glitchless zero cycle strategy. In a random seed, it's just going to be rare for you to get this, so I wouldn't try to go for an instant zero cycle. So I have some ideas for an RSG zero cycle that I want to show after this, but for now, the last thing I wanted to leave you with is a method to practice the timing and helping out with the damage bed hits for any of these zero cycles. So either if you want to practice this instant zero cycle on a set seed, or if you want to do this in co-ops, what I would do is find a dragon where you either know it's going to be a close or a far dragon. In this case, we have a close one, and so the node it's going to go to 7 out of 8 times when we save and quit the world is this one. And so I would, make... Again, we need to get roughly 30 blocks above this node. We don't want to let the dragon get below that, so I would roughly go around 30 blocks above this and make my obsidian up here. And it's easiest to do this with 2 obsidian, but you can do this with like waterlogged and stuff like that. So anyway, I build this obsidian maybe 30 blocks up here, and you want to go 1, 2, 3, 4 blocks down and build 2 blocks over. This kind of gives you the same height as a traditional one cycle that you'd be familiar with down in the center perch. So that's why I choose this height. And I'm building out of netherrack because this is one of the weakest blast resistant blocks. And so a lot of these blocks are going to disappear when you start doing this bed cycle. But you'll notice this one that I'm standing on, specifically this many blocks down and this many blocks over, will never be destroyed, even if it's really weak. So that's because this obsidian right here is preventing most of the damage to ourselves and the damage to this block, whereas this obsidian is simply just to place the beds on. So that's why these two are in this position. So from here, I would just keep saving and quitting the world. And respawning the dragon. We know that most of the time it's going to spawn and go towards this node, so I can just practice my 1 cycle, or 0 cycle, I should say. So the height of this obsidian is really trial and error. You should just kind of try a few positions and see if the first bed you get is good damage or not. This one is 20, so I'd probably go a little bit lower or higher in the future. And the last thing I would do, the kind of last piece of advice I have for you is this node is chosen here every time you save and quit, and it's chosen based on the block below it. It's a certain amount of blocks above the block below it. So if you accidentally have a bed or something already here, when you save and quit the world, the node is going to reposition because it thinks this bed is now the lowest block, and so it's going to be way up there. So you can't have anything blocking this node when you save and quit the world. So yeah, that's how I get the setup in order to begin practicing. Now, once you get a height that you're comfortable with, you'll notice that the dragon isn't facing the same direction every single time when you trigger the first bed. And this is because the dragon actually spawns with another variable that I didn't mention. It's either going to be going clockwise or counterclockwise, and it's a 50-50 chance. So in this case, I got, if I'm looking from above, I would consider this a counterclockwise dragon. And so its head is going to be approaching the first bed from the left in this instance. But if I save and quit, there's a 50-50 chance that if I start up this world, it's going to be a clockwise dragon. Did we get it here? Yeah, I think we got it here. So this one's going clockwise, and so its head is going to be coming at this from a different angle, but you'll notice it's roughly the same height. So you'll have to play around with this and make sure that you have a position that is comfortable for both a clockwise and a counterclockwise dragon. And so this obsidian I would have to move and to get into a better Y height for this specific dragon. So once you've got your end island and you've got an obsidian set up to accommodate both the clockwise and counterclockwise dragon rotation, and it's a pretty good bed damage on the first hit each time, I would highly recommend downloading Matthew Bolan's mod in the description. Not only does it show when you place a bed the potential damage at each tick if you did explode the bed right then, but it also shows exactly where the dragon's head at, which is really valuable. So I would download this mod, and then I would also record yourself and replay this at 0.25 times speed so that you can get an idea of exactly when to trigger these beds. In general, I would suggest triggering these beds much earlier than you would expect coming from a 1 cycle perspective. And the earlier beds, I would trigger 1 to 2 ticks after the max damage. And so what I mean by you want to trigger these beds earlier than you would expect is coming from a 1 cycle perspective, you're thinking about triggering the bed pillow when it's right below the dragon's head hitbox. The issue with that is when you see this purple line that Matthew Bolan has added into this mod, that actually tracks the current position of the dragon's head where it's taking damage. And so you can see it's actually way, way over here. It's much further ahead than where the dragon's head is visually for us. And so you can actually see the damage has already passed its peak. If I triggered this right on this tick, it would have done max damage. And instead, I triggered the bed right here, which is more intuitive for me, but it's lower damage. And so in this instance, I think this tick would be the perfect time to trigger this bed. So I lost about 5 damage on this explosion. So, it's very counterintuitive. You want to trigger the beds much earlier than you would expect. But also, I've noticed that the first 2 or 3 beds, if you're going for a 5 bed, you want to trigger the tick or 2 after the peak damage. So right here was pretty perfect, a 44 damage bed right after the 45. The reason for that being is there's a balance between upwards knockback and high damage. If you trigger a bed early, you can get really high damage, but you won't get as much vertical knockback. And so the first beds, it's important you give enough vertical knockback to continue the cycle. So 1 or 2 ticks late is actually good. The final beds, though, you can actually trigger them a little bit early. You'll notice here the dragon's head, if you trigger the bed early, it'll still hit the dragon's head fully, but it won't give as much knockback. So the earlier beds, you want to trigger them later so that you give enough knockback to continue the cycle. The later beds, you can be a bit more greedy and try to get high damage and hit them exactly on the tick of the max damage. So the last thing I'll leave you with is my current best idea for an RSG 0 cycle that you could do in less than 1.5 minutes that works on every single end, as long as you have at least 1 pearl and 1 or 2 obsidian. So I apologize, this is not a complete full end fight. I'm having trouble getting a really consistent setup that's really fast as well. And so half of this is done in survival, and then I switch over to spectator. I just want to show the idea and proof of concept of what I'm going for. So what I'm about to show you uses a bug that's been in the game for a while. Some of you probably have heard about this many times. Some of you, this is probably brand new, but basically this bug has been in the game for a while, and essentially flowing water pushes the dragon down. It's very simple. It's easily recreatable. Works every time you use water. Flowing water just pushes the dragon down. It has for a long time, and Mojang has not fixed it. So I start off in survival mode here, and the basic idea of this is to destroy this crystal when the dragon cannot strafe me immediately. And if I destroy this crystal standing at this position, wherever the dragon is from the end on the end island, it will choose a strafe node that's directly above this crystal to go to next every single time. So as long as the dragon doesn't fireball me, it's always going to try to get above this crystal. It will always circle on this east pillar. And so right now what the dragon is doing is it's circling, trying to go up above to get to that orange target block, because when I kill the crystal, it always tries to go to that node, but the flowing water is pushing it down. It might seem buggy and glitchy to some of you, but this is a well-known mechanic that has been in the game for many versions. And so essentially the dragon is kind of in an equilibrium here based on how much water flow we put on it. And so it's trying to go up to the node, but the water is pushing it down. And so in theory, there is some setup. I've put some obsidian here where you could go under this pillar and place these beds and block yourself off so the dragon can't see you. And trigger some beds continuously, just like a pseudo kind of 0 cycle. So I haven't gotten a consistent setup at all. I apologize. This is just a proof of concept. It's not much, but I think there's something here, and with the instant SSG style that I showed before, there's a really easy bed pattern that you can 5 or 6 bet every time. There's just not a consistent, easy setup. With this RSG idea, we have a consistent, easy setup that you can get every time with every end, but we just don't have a bed pattern, a spot where you can cycle and easily do bed damage. So we have both missing pieces of the puzzle. We just need a way to put them both together in the same setup. So I think this is worth exploring. I think we're very close. Again, could always use help and ideas from the community. This stuff you can download and play with yourself. It's a really exciting time to explore this. And yeah, we've already seen the viability of Zero Cycle and co-ops. We already got a really good run with it. So with that, yeah, I hope you enjoyed, and good luck using Zero Cycles.